Mega Maniacs, this is Mr. MegaManFan, and you are looking at Phelios for Sega Genesis, a Sega exclusive, never released on Super Nintendo, barely made it onto Virtual Console, only in Japan, July 28, 2009. Find the Sword of Phelios, battled through 7 levels of monster-infested worlds in this Greek epic. Fight evil in ancient Greece. And I have a complete copy of Phelios, which is not the most common of Sega Genesis games I've ever featured on Genesis does. Loose, this cart goes for over 20 bucks. Complete, it goes for over 40. And if somehow you had a brand new, never opened, still shrink-wrapped copy, it goes for over 100. Not the least, not the most expensive game to ever feature on Genesis does, but certainly not the cheapest. And something just fell out of the instruction manual. What do we have here? Why, it's an epilepsy warning. A small percentage of individuals may experience epileptic seizure when exposed to certain light patterns or flashing lights. Namco, what are you doing? You made a video game that was the equivalent of the Pokemon episode in Japan that caused over 1,000 kids to get sick. I may be overestimating, but it was a lot. And this cartridge is a lot blue. The box is blue, the card is blue, but the copyright date is not new, nor is this borrowed, however that saying goes about something old, something new. Anyway, the usual warnings are on the back. Don't immerse it in water, don't expose it to sunlight, don't feed it after midnight. You know the deal. I think it's time we put this in the Analog Mega SG and play Phelios, or Phelios, however you're supposed to say that, for ourselves. So let's stick this thing into the slot and let's get started. Now, as I like to do before I give my final thoughts and whether or not you should seek out this game, Genesis does will start with a little background information about said game, which was developed and published by Namco, and Phelios was designed by Satoru Yamada for both arcade and Mega Drive. It was released in the arcade in December 1988, Mega Drive July 20, 1990, an unknown date in North America in 1990. Virtual Console was 2009, as noted. The player takes control of the Knight Apollo, the god of the sun, who sets off on the legendary winged horse Pegasus to rescue his lover Artemis, the goddess of the moon, from the titan Typhon. The game takes its name and little else from Greek mythology. Nice note there, Wikipedia editor, in which Apollo, god of the sun, was actually Artemis' brother. The game shows players an Artemis that acts as a princess, but in Greek mythology, she was the goddess of the hunt and took pride in never being with any man. Once again, Wikipedia correcting the factual inaccuracies of a shoot-'em-up game. I don't think anybody who played this actually cared that much, but apparently there were people who cared about this fact. The game was never released in arcades in the United States due to Artemis bondage torture scenes, which were shown between each stage. They were similar to those from Rolling Thunder, and while no nudity is shown, the scenes were still somewhat strong to be shown in an arcade game during the early 16-bit era. This game's score also gives the illusion of allowing values which do not end in 0, like Hopping Mappy, Bakutsu Kajuti, and Metal Hawk before it. However, the smallest point value the game can award to a player for killing an enemy is 10. And as you can see here, it's pretty prototypical in the vertical shoot-'em-up genre. It has power-ups like speed up, duplicate your weapon, get shields, get homing attacks, get beam weapons, and you just move from side to side, avoiding the enemy fire and taking out the enemies that you see. And although I'm not the world's greatest shoot-'em-up player, I seem to be adapting to Phelios fairly quickly here, especially given how long it's been since I played it. And I feel like I'm doing pretty well. I'm not going hit-free, but I'm doing okay. One of the things I'm not using as much as I should be, though, is the fact that there is a charged attack where if you hold the B button and release it, you actually fire a charged energy shot, much like Mega Man in the X series and the later Mega Man games on the NES. When you hold down the button, you release a more powerful attack. The longer you wait, the more charged up it is until it gets to a point where it's fully charged and can be charged no more. I'm going to try to take advantage of it more during this boss fight with Medusa, where she's got the snakes on her head, and they are nasty looking. Should get that haircut trimmed, girl. And that head floating off the body, also probably not a good thing. Now, you can take more than one hit, but I had already taken a couple to that point, so I was dead as a doornail when I got whacked. So, seems to be like 2 or 3 hits is your limit, unless you've got the shield or power up that will give you an extra hit. I believe that your lives are in the lower right corner underneath the sword, but I could be wrong. While I complete this boss fight, let's go back to some facts from the always reliable Wikipedia. The player takes control of Apollo, who is mounted upon the back of his winged horse Pegasus. Pressing the firing button makes his sword fire a tiny shot. While holding it down, charges up the sword, as I previously mentioned. Releasing the button shoots a bigger fireball. Even the smallest enemies take multiple hits, so the little shot is of no use. Seems like some editorializing on the part of the editor there. Each of the game's 7 stages is divided into 2 to 4 sections. The transition from one to another is indicated by a block of text, as you can see right there. And then, once he has won the boss battle, he proceeds to a mirrored pool where he receives a message from Artemis. Yeah, looking at her in chains here, I can see why this might have been considered a little too risque for arcades in the United States. Not saying that we're not prudes here, but yeah, we can kind of be prudes here. Apollo can take up to 4 hits before dying, indicated by playing card hearts at the bottom of the screen, determined by how the arcade cabinet is set. But he will die instantly if he flies into a wall or touches a boss's head. The game also features voice samples, in Japanese for the original arcade and Mega Drive versions, but in English for both the Genesis and European Mega Drive. If the rank select option in the arcade version's menu has been set to on, players will be able to select an easy or hard game mode. And if you saw the select screen at the beginning, when you hit the option button and use start, it gives you that choice on the home version where you can play a mode with only 4 stages or one with all full 7 stages. And here's what Wikipedia has to say about that. The easy mode does not feature the game's complete ending sequence as a result. Now, there are no reviews for this game listed here on Wikipedia, so I have no references to how other people felt about the game in the era. But here's what I can tell you about it from my own personal experience. It's deceptively easy at the beginning, and then increasingly hard once you get to stage 2 and onward. You have to memorize these patterns, which is pretty typical for a shoot 'em up, but they're not exactly inaccurate by saying that you're not going to hit anything other than if you use your charge shot. I mean, it's useful for taking out groups of enemies at one time, but really it's also your only defense against the fact that there are multiple things coming at you. So if you're not using the charge shot to take out as many things that are shooting at you as you can at one time, you're kind of boned. So you got to memorize where they are, and you got to hit them as many as you can in a group shot to keep progressing through the game. It's relentlessly vertical scrolling. It's not scrolling super fast, but they are coming at you in wave after wave after wave. The one nice thing I will say is that you do get restored at least a handful of your power-ups when you go back to the beginning after dying. So there is some lenience. It does give you a little bit of a chance to recover and get some part of your power-ups back to help you fight the battles, but it's not going to be as much as if you were able to retain all of your power-ups from one section to the next, which, like games such as Gradius and Life Force and Darius and other shoot-em-ups that are pretty famous, you just need to hang on to the power-ups that can get you through an entire stage, and if it lets you carry them on to the next stage, so much the better. So the progress I can make at this point in stage 2 is pretty limited because I can only get these 3 back at the beginning, 2 speeds and 1 option, and then I just have to survive after that. And I don't have these patterns fully memorized to that level yet, so it's pretty difficult. If I spent a considerable amount of time mastering Phelios, this feels like a game you could beat in a half hour or an hour. It's not an incredibly deep game, but it's not an unfun game. There are certain games where I'll say it's rare, but it's not worth it because you're not going to get much fun out of it. But this one, I think I can actually justify spending $20 for this game. That may be a hard sell to casual gamers who can find stuff cheap in bargain bins here, there, and everywhere. But I'm going to suggest to you, if you're a Genesis collector and you don't already have Phelios in your collection, and you find a copy at a thrift or a pawn shop for a few bucks, it's not just a bargain, it's also going to be a lot of fun to play. And if you don't have that kind of money laying around, which I understand a lot of us don't, especially me, I got this game long ago when I got it in a big lot of Genesis games for relatively little money, so I didn't have to pay the price it goes for now. And I'm not saying everybody should, but I would say at least try it out in emulation first. And if you enjoy it, if it's your kind of shoot 'em up game, then maybe you'll want to make that investment later, or maybe you can just keep hunting for it out in the wild and hope you stumble across it. I think it's one of those Namco games that's probably worth it just for the fact that when you get Namco arcade collections, this is not one they include in it. I don't think that's just because of the raciness or alleged raciness of Artemis in Bondage, which is a reminder that this is not a channel for those 13 and under, the fact that we're discussing this. If you're over 13 and you've given your consent to YouTube, that's fine. If you're over 18, way, 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 way better. But this is an adult's channel. I'm an adult. This is for adults. So COPPA, take note. But anyway, I think the reason it doesn't get included in things like Namco Arcade Classic compilations is because nobody cares. I mean that in the nicest way possible, but you don't hear people talking about Phelios. You don't hear people raving about Phelios as being one of the greatest shoot 'em ups of all time. It just doesn't have that kind of legacy that you get from games like the aforementioned Darius and Gradius and those era of shoot 'em up games. So I'm just going to leave you on that note and let you watch the rest of my gameplay before this fades out. But I'll say, as always, thank you for watching. I'm Mr. MegaManFan. Phelios is pretty good. It's not the best, not the worst, but it's more than fair. It's got good scrolling, good arcade action. It's fun to play. You should check it out. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. And here's some more gameplay footage.